My hometown is Putian, a southern coastal city home to 2 million people, a mid-sized town by Chinese standard. Because of the mountain terrain in the province, transportation and communication was difficult historically. Every city formed its own dialect. In Putian, locals mostly speak in a dialect. You could get by with knowing Mandarin, but may get charged higher price in the market. In the 70s, near the end of Cultural Revolution, Putian, like the rest of China, was still relatively poor. Everyone I knew had only 2 sets of clothes for the season, one to wear while the other one was washed. In Putian, people celebrate 2 New Year's Eve instead of 1. Legend says many years ago, pirates raided the town during Chinese New Year's Eve, interrupted the festivity. On the second day of New Year, villagers visited family and neighbor to make sure they're still alive. Having survived the raid, people celebrated by having a more extravagant holiday 3 days later. Soon, the tradition of not visiting people on the second day of Chinese New Year and then celebrate the New Year's Eve twice was cemented in Putian culture. When I was young, my father worked in Shanghai as a doctor, and my mother resided in a small nearby town called Xianyu as the acupuncture specialist in Chinese medicine. My parents left me in Putian with my grandparents and cousins in my early days. The Zhang family had been in Putian for several generations. Whenever a family member earned enough money to buy a house, they bought the house next to one of my relatives' own. By the time I was born, a whole block belonged to my extended family. Countless times, I would be introduced to a stranger only to find they were a distant uncle or aunt. The block was across from the primary school with a large playground. Over the years, my grandparents took care of 10 cousins. The kids were largely left to their own device. Nearly everything we learned originated from our older cousins. Older cousins were responsible for making sure little ones staying in a crib or playpen and didn't cry. Admittedly, the smaller kids were sometimes just left in a crib while we had fun at the nearby playground. We also found other things to entertain ourselves, listening to adult gossiping, watching grandma cook, playing board games and card games till we could do it with our eyes closed, and goofing around in the alley at night. The level of freedom I was granted growing up sharply contrasts a typical childhood nowadays. All of our days were unstructured besides an afternoon nap during the hottest hour of the day, and there was so much time to waste. When I was 5, my sister was born. Originally, my grandma was to take care of my sister, but my aunt became pregnant. So grandma moved to help take care of the aunt's child, and my sister was sent to the poor countryside. A year later, grandma came back, and my sister was sent back to the city. My sister was malnourished, dressed in rag. She looked so skinny that you could see bone underneath her skin. Her caretaker left her in a house alone while they worked in the field. Cross-eyed, she wouldn't stop sucking her thumb. I remember seeing her for the first time and thinking how pitiful she was. It would be a year or so before she caught up developmentally with the other children. Eventually, my parents moved back to Putian together, so my sister and I lived with them. My youngest sister, born a year after my middle sister, stayed with us. Unlike my grandparents, my father was very involved in my life. She taught me how to read, and when I was older, she taught me English. My grandmother was illiterate, so she was unable to teach me such things. Although my father watched over my sister and I closely, we still had lots of freedom in our childhood that never changed. Looking back, I can't say whether or not my childhood freedom had a good or bad effect in my life. It was a happy childhood, simple in terms of material, but we didn't lack anything essential. On one hand, I learned communication, leadership skills, and the ability to adapt on my own through natural child play. On the other hand, I didn't have any formal learning activities outside of school and didn't receive that much attention. In the 80s, after one child policy was enacted, childhood experience and family structure was redefined. Many parents in China only have one child to take care of. Sometimes they plan everything for their kids. The children didn't get opportunity to just be themselves and do nothing. There are pros and cons. Regardless of how much attention your parents give you, I believe your parents give you the best they can, even when it seems like it's not a lot. Now that I live in the US, my hometown and childhood remain a fond memory. Thinking about my origins reminds me of who I am. I miss how much the city had changed when I visit as an adult. My hometown and childhood will always be an integral piece of my identity. When I am in a difficult time, thinking about my past gives me the strength to go on.
Wait, how old are you now